In the heart of London's swinging 60s, two brothers ruled the streets. They were charming, stylish, untouchable, but beneath the suits and smiles, they ran one of the most violent empires the city had ever seen. Their names? Ronnie and Reggie Kray. Twin brothers, same face, same ambition, same hunger for control. To the public, they were celebrities. To the police, they were ghosts. And to anyone who crossed them, they were executioners. Everyone in the East End knew their name. The Kray twins didn't just break laws, they rewrote them. From illegal gambling to protection rackets, they owned nightclubs, politicians, and half the London underworld. But here's the twist. For years, no one could prove a thing. The twins smiled in front of cameras, shaking hands with movie stars and MPs. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, people were disappearing. And that's where this story turns dark. It all started with a nightclub called Esmeralda's Barn, a hotspot for actors, models, gangsters, owned by the Krays, the perfect front for a criminal empire. But one night, a man named Jack the Hat McVitie made a mistake. He worked for the twins, helped move their money, run their schemes. Then he stole from them. A lot. Reggie told him to pay it back. Jack refused. A week later, he vanished. Witnesses say he was invited to a party. Drinks, music, laughter, then silence. According to whispers, Reggie stabbed him. Ronnie watched, and everyone else stayed quiet. But here's the thing, there was no body, no weapon, no witnesses, just rumors. And yet, within months, London's most feared men started falling apart. Ronnie had become erratic, violent, paranoid. He believed MI5 was watching him. Reggie tried to keep control, but their empire was cracking. Rival gangs smelled weakness. Police closed in. Still, the Krays laughed. They'd bribed officers, silenced witnesses, and built a wall of fear so high, no one dared climb it. Until one man did. Detective Leonard Nipper Reed, Scotland Yard. He'd spent years chasing them, gathering scraps of evidence no one else dared touch. He knew the Krays' downfall wouldn't come from bullets. It would come from their own people turning on them. And that's exactly what happened. In 1968, several of their closest associates flipped, spilling everything. The parties, the beatings, the murders no one could talk about. Detective Reed launched Operation Countryman, one of the biggest anti-gang investigations in British history. And for the first time, the Kray twins weren't untouchable. Police raided their homes. Nightclubs were shut down. Files, weapons, and money gone overnight. But here's what still haunts investigators today. When police stormed Reggie Kray's house, they found something strange. A photo album, thick, leather-bound. Every page held names and dates. Some names had red X's through them. Others were underlined in blue. It wasn't just a record of friends. It was a list. That night, Detective Reed asked Reggie what the markings meant. Reggie smiled and said, "Those in blue are alive. For now." A week later, a man from that list, a known Kray associate, turned up dead in a canal. No witnesses, no suspects, just like Jack the Hat McVitie. But again, no body was ever officially linked to them. No evidence that could hold up in court. Still, the jury convicted them. Both brothers sentenced to life for murders that technically had no proof. No witnesses, no remains, just fear. The Kray twins were locked away in separate prisons. For years, they ruled from behind bars, using coded letters and visitors as messengers. But even then, the violence didn't stop. And here's where the story takes its darkest turn. In 1985, decades after their conviction, a new piece of evidence surfaced. A hidden tape recorded in a London flat. The voice on it claimed to be Jack the Hat McVitie, alive, speaking 16 years after he was declared dead. If that tape is real, it means one thing: the entire case that sent the Krays to prison might have been built on a lie. Who was on that tape? If Jack was alive, who did Reggie kill that night? And if the body was never found, what really happened inside that party? The answers are darker than anyone expected. The tape surfaced from nowhere. No label, no fingerprints, just a cassette left in a brown envelope, dropped at a London newspaper office in 1985. The reporter played it once, and what they heard changed everything. A man's voice, rough, tired, almost whispering. "My name's Jack McVitie, and I'm not dead." 4 years, Jack the Hat McVitie was said to have been murdered by the Kray twins. It was the case that put them away for life. But if this voice was real, if Jack had faked his death, then the entire trial was built on a lie. Scotland Yard reopened the file in secret. A new task force, Operation Silent Echo, began analyzing the tape. Voice experts compared it with old recordings of Jack from police interviews. The match? 87% identical. Not perfect, but close enough to raise alarms. If Jack was alive, where was he hiding? And more importantly, who was buried in his place? The recording hinted at something else. The voice mentioned a name. "Freddie," he said. "Freddie took the fall. Not me." Detectives cross-referenced every Freddie tied to the Krays. They found one Freddie Mills, a former boxer, a local celebrity, found dead in his car in 1965, ruled a suicide. But the tape hinted it wasn't suicide at all, that Freddie was murdered to cover for Jack. If that's true, it means Reggie Kray was convicted for killing the wrong man. And the real Jack McVitie might have escaped justice by trading his identity for someone else's life. But why come forward 20 years later? And why send that tape anonymously? Investigators believed someone wanted to reopen old wounds. And when they traced the envelope, the return address led to something chilling. A P.O. box registered under the name Ronald Kray. Ronnie had been in Broadmoor Psychiatric Hospital for years. He was medicated, unstable, but still communicating. Visitors said he spent hours talking to himself, writing strange letters that were never mailed. Could Ronnie have staged the tape to confuse investigators? Or was it his way of confessing something bigger? A former cellmate later told police that Ronnie had an obsession. He claimed the person buried under Jack's name wasn't a man at all. The cellmate swore Ronnie said, "She came to the party looking for me. She saw too much, so Reggie took care of it." That one sentence turned the case upside down. Because if a woman had been killed that night and buried under a false name, then the Kray's empire had covered up something far darker than anyone imagined. In 1987, Scotland Yard exhumed the supposed grave of Jack McVitie. When the coffin was opened, the remains inside didn't match his dental records. It wasn't Jack. It was someone else. DNA analysis hadn't yet advanced far enough to identify the body. All investigators could tell was that the remains belonged to a woman in her late 20s. The press never got wind of it. The report was buried sealed under the Official Secrets Act. But decades later, one of the officers involved leaked what he knew. The woman's name might have been Sarah Lee, a nightclub hostess who went missing around the same time. Her last known employer? Esmeralda's Barn, owned by the Krays. So now the story changes again. Maybe Reggie didn't kill Jack. Maybe he killed Sarah. And maybe Jack the Hat McVitie helped hide the truth. But if Jack was alive, someone had to be protecting him. And there was only one person with the power to do that, even from behind bars. In 1990, a visitor signed into Broadmoor using the name S. Lee, the same name as the woman believed to be dead. There's no record of her leaving, no footage, no trace, just a signature, in her own handwriting. Was Sarah Lee still alive? Did she fake her death too? Or was someone using her name to send a message from inside Broadmoor? Whatever the answer is, it lies somewhere within the walls of that hospital. The truth about who really died that night will finally come to light. The name is Lee, written in neat, confident handwriting, dated April 12, 1990. The same woman believed to have been murdered 23 years earlier. But how could that be? The grave said she was dead. DNA proved the body was female. And yet, her name appeared in Broadmoor's visitor log. The same day Ronnie Kray was seen speaking to someone off record. Guards remembered her. Dark coat, hat pulled low, didn't speak much. Signed in, went straight to Ronnie's cell block. 40 minutes later, she was gone. But here's the thing, security footage from that day? Erased. Hard drive wiped. Camera room door forced open. Scotland Yard reopened the file again. They called it Project Phantom. And when they pulled Ronnie's final letters from Broadmoor, they found something hidden in the margins. Coordinates, written beside a single phrase, "Where the river forgets." Detectives followed the clue to a small boathouse on the Thames, long abandoned. Inside, under the floorboards, a suitcase. Inside were photos, dozens of them. Jack the Hat McVitie, Sarah Lee, and Reggie Kray, standing beside a woman who looked exactly like Sarah, but the photo was dated 1977, 10 years after she supposedly died. So who was this woman? Was Sarah alive all along? Or had someone else taken her identity? One of the photos had writing on the back. "Keep the story alive, he's still out there." And that's when everything changed. A journalist named Michael Lister, who'd been digging into the Kray files, went missing 3 days after contacting police about those photos. His flat was found unlocked, laptop open. On the screen, one sentence typed and unfinished. Sarah was never a victim. She was. Investigators later found fingerprints on the suitcase, but they didn't match Sarah or the Krays. They matched Jack McVitie, meaning Jack wasn't dead, and Sarah might not have been his victim but his partner. Together, they may have staged everything. The murder, the cover-up, the trial. A long con using the Kray legend as their camouflage. And the more police dug, the stranger it got. Financial records showed money being moved, under shell companies, from the Kray's old businesses to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, registered to a fake name, S. Lee Holdings Ltd. But here's the part that no one can explain. When detectives tried to trace the account, the IP address pinged from a small town in Spain. They sent a team there, found a villa, empty except for one framed photograph on the wall. It showed 2 people sitting at a cafe table, older, smiling. The man, unmistakably Jack the Hat McVitie. The woman, Sarah Lee. Dated 1989, 1 year before her supposed visit to Broadmoor. So maybe the Krays weren't the only masterminds in London's underworld. Maybe the real architects of the deception, the ones who manipulated everything from the shadows, were the people the world thought were dead. Jack and Sarah. And if that's true, it means the Krays went to prison for a murder that never happened. When police enhanced that recording, they discovered something chilling. It wasn't just Jack's voice. It was Sarah's, laughing softly in the background. Alive, hidden, listening. But here's where it gets darker. A month after the tape was decoded, that same boathouse on the Thames burned to the ground. No suspects, no footprints, and one final message, spray-painted on the door in black paint. The story isn't over, and maybe it never was. The boathouse fire destroyed everything. Files, photos, DNA evidence. Everything that could prove what really happened that night in 1967. But fire doesn't erase truth. And as investigators sifted through the ashes, they found something the flames couldn't touch. A melted audio cassette, marked only with 2 initials, RK. When the forensics team restored what they could, they uncovered the final recording from Ronnie Kray himself. A message never meant to be heard. His voice, weak, almost whispering. "You think Jack fooled us. You think Sarah was a ghost. But they weren't the story. We were." Ronnie spoke of a deal, a secret arrangement between the Kray twins, Jack McVitie, and an unnamed woman. Not murder, but manipulation. A false crime staged to draw police attention away from something far worse. He said, "Jack didn't die. He disappeared for us." And she made sure no one ever found him. That she, investigators now believe, wasn't Sarah Lee. Her real name? A cousin. A quiet figure who managed the twins' business accounts. Barely mentioned in their history until now. Eleanor vanished in 1967, the same week as Jack. Her disappearance was never investigated. But new evidence shows her passport was used years later to open the S. Lee Holdings account in the Cayman Islands, meaning Sarah Lee was a name borrowed from someone who never existed, and the real woman behind it all was family, Eleanor Kray, the invisible twin. the quiet accountant who built the empire's financial web. And when the walls started closing in, she orchestrated the perfect exit. Jack the Hat McVitie didn't fake his death. She did it for him. She paid him to vanish, used her identity to mask his trail, then turned the Kray's empire into a smokescreen for her own escape. By the time the twins were in prison, Eleanor was already gone, living under aliases across Europe. Records show transfers to Spain, then Morocco, then finally Argentina. And here's the twist no one expected. A British journalist tracked her last known location to Buenos Aires in 2001. He found a woman in her 70s, living under the name Elena M. When shown photos of the Kray brothers, she smiled and said, "My boys made mistakes, but I cleaned them up." The journalist recorded that interview, but before he could publish it, he died. Heart attack, no autopsy, no footage ever recovered. 2 weeks later, the same Buenos Aires apartment was found empty. Inside, on the kitchen table, a note in English, written in the same hand that signed the Broadmoor logbook years earlier. "Stop digging. The dead are better off forgotten." So maybe the Krays weren't the only ones controlling London's underworld. Maybe the real architect, the one who pulled every string, who outsmarted the police, the gangsters, and even history, was the woman nobody noticed. Eleanor Kray, the silent twin, the ghost behind the legend. If that's true, then everything we thought we knew about London's most infamous crime lords was a lie. The murders, the convictions, the myth, all part of a plan written not by the Kray brothers, but by the sister who erased herself to survive. And maybe that's the real story of the Kray Empire. Not power, not violence, but the one person smart enough to disappear and never be found. Subscribe, like, and share for more.